Welcome back to module 2 of the 4 zones of conflict training. In the first module, we mapped out the 4 zones of conflict model and exposed some of the default scripts that drain love out of the room. Today, in episode 2, or section 2, we are diving into the exact psychology of avoidance. What happens when you need to get out? We're looking at what happens when a man who hates conflict steps into a disagreement and how his intellect stops looking for connection and starts looking for an exit. We're going to break down the 5 phrases men use to blow up the bridge that they really want to be building between them and their partner and their differences. More importantly, I'm going to share real world breakthrough data from our man program calls to show you exactly how to dismantle these cycles in real time. So let's dive into module 2. So we're going to begin by actually going into the phrases that you might hear yourself make. If you're a woman listening to this, you might have heard your partner say. So again, these are the 5 of the most common phrases that men who avoid conflict or are afraid of conflict use to escape the room as quickly as possible. What they don't realize is they're also blowing up the bridge. So the bridge is meant to be there so they can bring the other person, bring their partner onto the same side so they can be on the same team. What they're actually doing is blowing up the fucking bridge. So that absolutely can't happen. First one, you might hear a man who wants to avoid conflict say is, "You're overreacting," or, "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this." In other words, your emotions are really big. I don't know how to respond to this. I feel really uncomfortable. The only thing I can do to make this stop is to try and get you to stop so that I don't have to feel what you're feeling. The second one, "You're impossible to please." Now, this one is a real cop out because if a man makes a woman unpleasable, then he doesn't have to try anymore. He doesn't have to raise his standards. He doesn't have to be accountable because it's always her problem. This is like a victim stance. It's a cop out of accountability and integrity. It stops him having to look at himself and to see whether there's any validity to her criticism. I don't have time for this. Now, this is a classic power move. It's saying that your time is fundamentally more valuable than her experience, her pain, her feelings, her bid for connection. She's trying to connect with you by sharing this. And what you're doing is closing down the door and saying, "Not interested." So she feels that what's important to her, what she's feeling, is not important to you. So she feels invalidated, which is going to be really hard for her. Yeah. So there's going to be some kind of reaction from that. The fourth phrase is, "I'm done with this." This is where a man uses the threat of abandonment to just force the conflict to stop. So he uses it to avoid looking at or bringing up any underlying insecurity. He uses it to avoid looking at or bringing up any underlying insecurity she's got, making her think that if she doesn't stop right now, the entire relationship is at risk. So even though, like, overtly, he might not be saying, "When I'm done with this," he might not be saying, "If you carry on, the relationship's over." There's an echo of that hostility which she feels, which to her triggers a high level of insecurity and doubt about the safety of the relationship. Yeah, and that if she dares to have an emotional response, there are going to be consequences. Final one, fine, whatever you want. This is using the victim role to punish her with your compliance. It's saying, of course, she has to be right. So you're going to go along with it. But underneath, there's like a deep hostility, passive aggression, and resentment simmering. And these reactions, again, because this is unconscious, again, because this stuff has been, it's been something that we've been reacting from, like a compensatory mechanism that has protected us from a very early age, really early in boys. Like, it's going to feel justifiable, it's going to feel logical, it's going to feel true. Even though these phrases that I've just listed are going to feel like an immediate win at the time or a quick relief in the moment, they act like a targeted missile strike on the very foundation of the relationship. Because none of those phrases that I just shared with you invite the other person in or tell the other person that you're willing to sit with them, be with them, relate to them and with them. They're either building walls or setting traps or active defenses. And the work that I do, whether it's in this stuff, it works particularly well in groups. So in the man program, it works particularly effectively. And in the days that I do, the workshops that I run, and the retreats that I run, this is really, really important. When we do this work interrelationally with other men, it changes the game because we can track the data with real men and look at when these scripts are running, what's going on, and also look at what happens when we start to dismantle these scripts by really going deep into the conflict zones, looking at the drama cycles that people find themselves in, and really exploring in a three-dimensional way. It's why it's particularly effective in person. You can do it, I can do it online as well, but in person it's really effective when you get people onto a floor mapping it out, looking at what these zones look like, and like being in them and then stepping outside and having other people kind of play roles. So you're like looking from the outside at what this looks like, and then you get this sense outside of yourself where you're removed, where you're like, fuck my life, that is toxic. And then when you can model it in a different way, breaking these zones down, getting rid of them, what that can look like in practice, stepping outside of it and then stepping into it, it it's like a whole new territory, a whole new level is revealed. Like you've got a new map, new coordinates for a new territory. Well, new coordinates for an old map that transforms it into a kingdom instead of a dying, decaying land. And in the man program, we looked at the data around zones 3 and 2, right, which is active escape and pacifying. The core pattern there is giving into what people want just to make the problem go away. Yeah. And we realize that we're diluting ourselves because we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be uncomfortable. Like, really, no one wants to be uncomfortable. And the breakthrough, though, is clear. If we stop doing that and show up more consistently and learn how to not leg it and not people please, then if we're daring enough, then our relationships are going to transform, like out of all, beyond all recognition. because we will be connecting to ourselves and connecting to other people in a very different way. It will be much more authentic. There'll be more risk taking, and there'll be more willingness to be in the discomfort that we feel and that our partner feels, right? And when we do that, we make ourselves heard and respected, and we make the other person feel heard and respected, rather than trying to leg it or people please. So, in fact, what they get, what the other person gets, is you. Like they get to understand how you are, how you feel, and how they affect you, and how you are relating to yourself and the world and your relationship. And when that stuff is all brought together and you're able to talk about it, to live with it, to be more harmonious and accept the ups and downs as inevitable rather than things to be like, I just want the ups, I don't want the downs, things change completely. So on a recent call that we had about these zones of conflict in the drama cycles, another guy on a call shared how zone 3 is still like where he's often stuck, and how feelings of outrage and injustice are massive for him. So it's that victim status. The outrage is like a childlike response born from a lot of fear around conflict. And by doing that, he proved that exit can be blocked. Yeah, he changed his script, and here's what he reported. I said how I felt in the moment, and like I was terrified, but it worked better. Because I wasn't trying to score points, I wasn't being hostile, I wasn't trying to hurt that person, I wasn't trying to exit. Yeah, I was saying it in a way that I wanted to them to understand me in the same way that I understood them. And so as a result of daring to be more brave and being scared at the same time, working through it at the time rather than letting it fester, rather than carrying all that stuff, I found that I've been able to have much more structured conversations and create repair that sticks with my wife. It doesn't, when we do this, when we dare to stay in the room in the messiness rather than leave, we don't have to have the perfect conversation, because repair isn't about saying all of the right things at the right time. Repair is as much about you both honoring each other and bringing that together and holding that together, and find, yeah, it's finding common ground and active listening and all of that kind of stuff as well, but it's more about making sure the bridge is intact and bringing that other person over and saying, okay, it's me and you against this thing that's coming up in both of us, which is the issue. Like, we're friends. Like, me and Rachel started saying that. I'm still your friend. It's fucking powerful to say that when you're disagreeing with someone, because it's like, oh, fuck. Okay. So this person still wants to be my friend even in this. Therefore, okay. Therefore, what is going on is a reaction to something, and it's not about that person not loving me and not respecting me. Changes the game completely. We we also had a man look at zone 1, which is active attack, and like we were laughing about this because of the pull of his ego. It was like feeling justifiably righteous in his indignation, like in his anger, and it was thinking about work at the time. And he traced the real payoff of dropping out of that zone, like dropping that act, that righteous indignation, right? When he stopped doing that, he got so much energy back because instead of thinking about all of the ways that he needed to protect himself or that that other person was wrong, he was able to bring more empathy and connection into the space and actually see that there's another person there who has a different opinion or a different way of doing things, or maybe even strong feelings. And he's like, that person, really cares about this. There's something going on for them. I don't have to make them right or wrong. I can actually be here and work through that with them because we need to get to a destination together. Yes, with heads of different departments, but ultimately our goal is the same, even if we're coming from different angles and we're trying to protect our interests. So maybe I can see him as someone that is under a lot of stress and is kind of done with this. And if I go in there as an ally rather than as attacker, that can completely change the interaction. Not saying we're going to be best friends, but maybe we can build something from a place of respect and empathy that wouldn't have been possible before. And then we can be like, okay, how can we better work together? Because anyone that's been a department head or a leader or a CEO of a business, and you've got these different departments, there's so much productivity lost when everyone's in their own silo, right? But if these departments actively or proactively are looking to work together, they're wasting a lot less time trying to interpret potential attacks or ways that other departments might be trying to stuff them up. Of course, there's politics in the workplace. Of course, there's hierarchy, social hierarchies in the workplace, but there's also an opportunity to work together to make things more efficient. And any department head that's able to do that, it's a good look. It's a good look because you can have honest conversations, you can have hard conversations where opinions differ, emotions are high, stakes are high, and you can be really honest, right? Without any of these fucking zones of conflict. Yes, and no one gets butt hurt. And you're like, you get to it and you look at what the problems are, and then you're like, okay, well, let's fucking work on something together. But there's a sneakier side of this framework, which is zone 4, right? Which is the deep shadow of the people pleaser. And one guy mapped this out, and he actually had to confront his core assumption, which is the belief that if he doesn't say yes to everyone, he's going to be left out, and the world won't function without him carrying it on his back. He literally said that. His breakthrough was realizing a new truth, which is really simple, but it's something that he couldn't comprehend, which is people would stay in his life even if he says no to them, as long as he's not a dickhead when he's saying no. Because you can always be like, nah, you're right. No, well, that doesn't work for me. Or I don't agree. I'm not going to do that. Because if you communicate in a way that is authentic to you without being in any of these zones, it's very unlikely the other person's going to be defensive because there's nothing to defend against because there's no animosity, there's no antagonism coming from you. And let's look at one more example, right, which is the guy who defaults straight to zone 3, which is peacekeeping, for a very specific reason, right? Because during an argument, he doesn't necessarily believe his own position or point of view. So he rolls over. So he doesn't, he maybe he has an authority issue, right? His new strategy is to break the cycle is powerful. It's like, give me time to reflect on where I'm in the wrong, where I can set a boundary and be firm without rolling over or trying to appease or be antagonistic or aggressive. Then I wouldn't have to hold on to resentment and run a strategy for passive aggression. So I have to actively be honest and hold boundaries. And remember that boundaries are what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And if they're crossed, it's communicated that there's a consequence. And that consequence is your behavior changes in some way. Yeah. So if this happens again, then I'm going to. And it's not a ultimatum. It's like, then you know, in some way you're going to get less of me. You're going to get my less of my support. You're going to get less of my time. I I may leave the room. I may go somewhere else if that continues. So it's very clear. Yeah. So it's designed to make that other person understand what's important to you. And then they get to make a choice as to whether they want to honor that or not. And I think something that's worth talking about, and I mentioned it a little bit there, is with peacekeeping and not saying anything in the moment. Um, it's a boundary issue. I think this is one of the things that I notice a lot. It's like when we have boundary issues, uh, it shows up in habits, how focused we are, how we eat, how we talk to ourselves, what we'll tolerate, even from ourselves, and then that obviously extends to other people. If other people have a strong opinion or are persuasive, yeah, and try and influence us, often we'll cave in. But yeah, we're abandoning ourselves. But actually, what else we're doing is we're showing that we don't have a strong sense of identity, right? And and it's not like we have to build a wall to protect ourselves. People often think that boundaries are walls that we have to protect ourselves with. Like, I've got to have stronger boundaries. What does that fucking mean? Actually, what you need to do is you need to say yes to what you want to say yes to and no to things you don't want to do. Yeah. And you need to do that cleanly. And there needs to be consequences to people that are not respecting your needs and not respecting your boundaries. You need to have those consequences. Yeah. If you lived like that, and I don't mean rigidly, but if you lived in a way where you could communicate really clearly and directly and you dealt with things as they came up, then you wouldn't second guess yourself in real time, and you wouldn't carry resentment. Right? Resentment would disappear, disappointment would disappear. So resentment, disappointment, having high expectations, for me, all of that is is just because you don't have solid boundaries with yourself. So when you drop these lines, these five phrases, when you slam the door, when you walk out, like I said in the last episode, you're not being a calm, rational man, right? And I know exactly what plays on your mind for days afterwards, right? Is this because there's going to be regret, there's going to be guilt, there'll be the resentment as well. Like, how do I do this differently? Like, what are we doing wrong? And when we are reacting, so when we're in one of these four zones, and again, if I can in the show notes, I will put the image. If I can't, I'll just put a quick summary of the four zones. But when we're in one of these four zones, so instead of being a calm, rational man, you're acting as a terrified little boy who never learned how it was possible to keep love and respect in the room when there's an argument, because he never had that experience when he was younger. Like, his needs were not allowed. Even if someone disagreed with them, they were invalidated, they were dismissed, they were shut down. Yeah, this happens from a very early age, from like 2 onwards. Normative male alexithymia, when boys are socialized out of emotions. The solution is simple though, but it ain't easy. It is about daring to stop these reactions in their tracks, to step out of the zones, to step out of those zones, which are all protective mechanisms. It means that you're going to have to stop running, turn to face the issue directly, look it in the eyes. You know, in the mythopoetic movement, there's these ideas of dragons, slaying a dragon, the hero's journey, slaying a dragon, right? But our dragons are really the stuff that we don't want to face, the emotions that we don't want to face, how we project onto other people what we think is going to happen based on what we felt happened when we were little. Yeah. All of that comes up and we just don't want to re experience it. Uh, and what's required is being willing to stay in the messiness of emotions, not looking to find a fix, not looking to make them go away, not running out the door, not trying to control someone else. And what we're left with then is like we've got these emotions which we're both feeling a lot of, high stakes. Like we're feeling that something big is at stake here if we get this wrong, and we have very different opinions. You know, there's a part of us that may be feeling or thinking this could be the end of the relationship if I fuck this up. Not necessarily the truth, unless it's built up over years and years and years. That's what stops us, but that's what stops us. What we are avoiding feeling and seeing is what we have to turn towards and meet. It's the only way. Like the only way out is through. George Harrison said that. You have to stay in it to win it. And when you do, right, everything changes. So my job in this podcast and the previous podcast, it's not to solve your long-standing conflicts today. Yeah, that's not my role, what I'm hoping to achieve. What I want to do is help you own how you show up in your arguments. And I want to challenge you to take this framework into your life this week. So think of a recent conflict with your spouse or circular argument, yeah, or even a coworker. When you got triggered, how did you stop being empathic? How did you use your mind to guess what they were thinking and what they intended, judge them, uh, and punish them? How did you do that? What did you do? How did you shield yourself and your feelings in your own suffering by being a victim? Or how did you try to fix them just to make yourself feel safe, like being a rescuer trying to solve? What what's the history behind that trigger? So looking at the four zones, which one is your absolute default setting when the shit hits the fan? What's the exact payoff you get when you break the script and stay present instead of attacking, disappearing, or pacifying? Now, what else is possible when you break that script and you stop doing what you normally do? What else would be possible? What would be different? What's one historical trigger or defensive judgment or fixing habit that you are committed to letting go of this week so that you bring love back into the room and respect back into the room and the relationship? When we start to map these conflict zones and the cycles that we find ourselves in, you get your strength and capability back. You get your agency back, which means you get to choose differently. When you know your pattern, you stop being a victim to your own reactions, right? You reclaim the lead in your home. If you're listening to this and you've realized you're running from one of these zones or you're reacting from one of these zones, Again, like I said in the first episode about the conflict zones, these have a 100% failure rate. So then it's not going to fix itself over time. It just won't. You have to actively do something about it. Okay, this concludes the video masterclass on the 4 zones of conflict. It is my intention that I provide you with a framework that's going to be useful to you, and I hope in some way it really has been. Mapping the cycling, mapping the phrases, mapping the zones gives you your agency back. When you know your pattern, you stop being a victim to your automatic childhood protective patterns, which is really important. You get to reclaim the lead in your home. Now, doing this free masterclass isn't going to change everything in your relationship, but it's going to give you a head start on where you were. I didn't design this video series just to give you intellectual information to think about. I designed it to provoke immediate opportunity for you to do something different. If you watch these 2 modules and realized you're running a system that is actively damaging your core relationship and you really need to make some changes, stop waiting for it to fix itself over time. You've got to take the lead because it won't sort itself out on its own. The next step is to move from theory, which is what you've just learned, to execution. If you're ready to map your personal conflict loops, break your default childhood script, and get the tactical real world tools to lead your relationship with integrity, with accountability, and with a level of strength and capability that has been missing, we need to talk. Click the link below this video and you can book a private strategy call directly with me. It's 45 minutes long, completely free. It is very limited. I will have to say this, there's very limited availability. We're going to look exactly at where your system is breaking down, build a clear path to bring the love and respect back into your home and your disagreements. Don't let this fester. Click the link below, book your call, and let's get to work. So, you've got to stay in it to win it. I'd love to see you on that call. Thanks for watching.